right now. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar. It is an opportunity for CRC members and beyond to learn a little bit more about the project that Tracsis executed on behalf of NICTD and the South Shoreline. With us today are a group of NICTD professionals led by Mike Noland, who is president and CEO of the South Shoreline and also chair of the Commuter Rail Coalition. And on the Tracsis side, are led by Chris Jackson, president of Tracsis US. And Tracsis has a couple of other folks on the phone as well who will be contributing to today's webinar. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Devin Rouse, who is our moderator for today, and we'll get started.
Yes, thanks, Kellyanne, and thanks everybody for joining us. This is going to be an interesting topic, actually. You know, it's something we don't really touch on too much in our meetings and discussions. The dispatching side of the house, aside from certification of dispatchers, which we'll leave alone for the moment, but the technology, the dispatching technology, and computer-aided dispatching, I think, for most railroads, the last time they really thought about it was when they had to implement PTC and make changes and implement back office servers and integrate it with dispatches and often upgraded it dispatching systems. So, you know, for many of us, it was pushed to get to the deadline and get PTC implementation, and we didn't really get a chance to look at dispatching as a functionality and how it affects our railroad and efficiency of our operations. So that's why I think this discussion today with Mike and his team is going to be an interesting one, because they did that, right? And we can get some insight into what that means for their operations, why they made the decisions and invested in this system in the first place, and a little bit more into where they think it'll bring them in the future and benefits of making that transition for their dispatching system. So as you know, as Kellyanne alluded to, we have a host of people here. Tracsis folks, you're outnumbered like 8-2, so hopefully you did a good job. Otherwise, you know, I guess it's remote, so you can escape easily in this case. But you know, if you didn't, I'm sure they'll let you know. But we'll start with a man who needs no introduction. That's Mike Noland. Everybody knows him. He's our chair for the CRC this year. And Mike, any introductory thoughts, or do you want to introduce your team at all, any more than Kellyanne has, before we jump into some of these slides and discussion points?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we've got some of the key NICTD team, the South Shore team that was part of PTC, but also the conversion into the modular system we pulled out of PTC, and that's the CAD system. We have, I can't see everybody who is on the screen there in our operations control center. I see Justin Miranda. It looks like, is that you, Pat Guest, there? Raise your hand if I'm calling your name.
Hello, sir.
Justin's our assistant CIO, was deeply in the conversion. We've got Pat Guest, who's implemented our PTC system. So our PTC manager, is that Jody? Raise your hand, Jody. Jody Schaff is our chief dispatcher. Sarah Krega, raise your hand, Sarah, our senior operations manager, also a former chief dispatcher and also a former dispatcher. So knows the conversion from Railcom to TMDS to Tracsis, inside and out. And then our CIO, Daryl Riddle, is also on the call, and Daryl's been instrumental in making sure that things go smoothly from an IT standpoint on the PTC CAD system side. Is there anybody else there that you've got that we can't see on camera, Justin?
Yeah, Anthony Hall's here.
Anthony. Oh, Anthony's our chief operations officer. He's not in the picture. He's hiding somewhere in the room, but he was there for the long nights where we flipped the switch from TMDS to Railcom Tracsis, and ultimately have flipped and not gone back. And so we're 100% Tracsis. at this point in time, and things are going well. That's the NICTD team, Devin, happy to answer any questions about the team or move into how we got to the next slide.
Yeah, no, we'll certainly get to that, and thank you for that. And this is the second, I think, panel that Anthony and I have been on in the last 6 months, 8 months. So it shows our age, unfortunately. We just sit on panels and do these types of things. But thank you for all of you for participating in this. Real quick for Tracsis, to give a quick introduction before we jump into the details there. I know, Chris, you're out there, and I think Marcelo Bravo, you're out there as well. For those of us that don't really know much about it, if you could give us a quick intro about your company and what Tracsis is. I know I learned about it, at InnoTrans last year. Really didn't know much before that. So if you could give a quick 2-minute intro about what Tracsis is and what you offer, and then we'll jump right into some of the discussion here on the slides.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. So I'm Chris Jackson. I'm president of Tracsis US, like Kellyanne said. So Tracsis, originally a UK-based rail software company. We're an acquisition-based group, so we acquired Railcom about 3 years ago now. Time flies past. Railcom got me as part of the deal, so I moved over from not so sunny England to equally not so sunny Rochester, New York. We specialize in enterprise level rail software solutions. So we're really bringing to bear international expertise in delivering these kind of projects for railroads across the UK and now North America. We do everything from scheduling and planning, safe working systems on the day, and obviously the dispatch and back office service that we're going to talk about today. Yeah, and we're joined today as well by Marcelo. So Marcelo, you can talk for yourself.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Chris. Yeah, so my name is Marcelo Bravo. I'm vice president at Tracsis. Been at Tracsis for about a year. I've been in and around the industry over 30 years. Spent 9 years of my career in Europe with one of the largest railcar manufacturers of the time, and then dealing with software as well. So I learned a lot, visited railroads all over Europe, as well as in the United States and North America. My current role is regarding the full suite of tools that Chris just referred to. So it's including the CAD and BOSS solutions that we're going to be talking about today, with focus on North America and FRA jurisdiction properties.
All right. Yeah, thank you both. All right, Angie, if you could go to the next slide, I think we'll start walking through some of the material here. First, Mike, let's go back to you and start with you. What really drove you to do this project in the first place? What made you decide to take a look at your dispatch system and replace it altogether?
I'm sorry, Devin, you broke. Well, somebody at the FRA decided it'd be a good idea to implement a system all at once at the same time for every railroad in the country. I'm sure that you weren't involved in that at all, Devin. You accurately hit the point that when we all were scrambling to put PTC in place, the residual kind of the components that went to the system were secondary. And I will say that we had purchased the Railcom dispatch system, and our dispatchers were very happy with it. And then we went out for proposals for PTC, got one 3 times the expected cost, and if we wanted to, it was an extra $6 million add-on above the TMDS system that was offered as part of the project. So unfortunately, that was an easy decision to make when we were scrambling to implement PTC. And so we went with the system that was offered to us. I think our dispatchers went kicking and screaming because while the TMDS system is functional, I'm not sure how flexible it is compared to what our dispatchers were used to. And I don't think it offered the opportunity to change very much a much more of a freight Class 1 based system that came along with being an IETMS railroad. So we found ourselves in a position where, yeah, we needed to meet the federal deadline. We needed to implement PTC. It was way beyond our original budget, and we had one proposer. So almost no competition in the field, and you accepted everything that came along offering. And so that's what we had for the first several years of our PTC implementation. And then as we began to roll out a couple of our big infrastructure projects, we had a 26-mile, $650 million double tracking project and a $950 million line extension on Westlake. We saw an opportunity that grew out of a budget bust on Westlake. The contractor, the low bidder on the design bid or proposer on the design bid project came in about $150 million over our budget on the project. So we sat down and we began to look at value engineering opportunities. And we looked at the cost to implement PTC on Westlake. And we realized that that really it was one-stop shopping with Wabtec, no competition. And so we came up with the idea of reaching out to our old CAD system folks at Railcom, who we were not able to utilize because they didn't into the back office. There was no interface between the CAD system and the back office with Railcom. So we said, would you be interested in coming in, developing a brand new, never been done before modular add-on to PTC and possibly give us an opportunity to reduce some costs on the project. And that's what it really grew out of, that partnership where Railcom jumped at the opportunity to develop a standalone product that could plug and play with IETMS railroads. And we took the leap of faith that Railcom had the resources and could develop that PTC BOSS interface. We had our agreements with Wabtec that required them to cooperate with us if we ever wanted to disengage, but we didn't know how easy that was going to be. So it was a leap of faith that we took and that Railcom took and that ultimately Tracsis saw, which was, in our minds, the opportunity, at least from our standpoint, to have to save us some dollars, which we were looking to value engineer out some of the construction costs and find better ways to build the mousetrap. And at the same time, the pitch to Railcom was, if you do this and you do this successfully, there'll now be competition in the railroad industry for CAD systems that will marry up with IETMS PTC systems. And so we took that leap of faith in 2020, knowing that we needed to be ready for the implementation of the double track service, which would be using the Tracsis Railcom when that system went online this past May of 2024. So a lot of coordination, a lot of activity, a lot of just good faith on both parties to lean in, and we're going to do what hadn't been done before and try to develop new technology that would not only benefit our railroad, but hopefully would open up opportunities for competition, at least in this small area in our PTC world that is so much controlled by a couple large entities with a monopoly on the market. So That's the start of our story. I'm not going to get to the end of the story, but that's how we got here. We're now running the Tracsis CAD system on a daily basis. So I'll turn it back to you, Devin, and we can talk about how we got there.
Yeah, thanks. And you hit on an important point there, and it's that making that decision in the first place, which I think is hard. I mean, most of us in the commuter rail world are used to having our backs up against the wall, trying to just deal with whatever balls are in the air at the moment, right? And so, looking at projects you had on at the moment, to try and take on an additional capital program and major infrastructure switch, if you will, if you want to call it a system switch from an infrastructure perspective, that's not insignificant. And there was probably some significant the leap of faith is what you mentioned, and I think that's true there, right? And I think for some of our members, that's probably the hardest point to get over is being willing to take that step and see where it gets you, because you can't get the benefits without taking that first step. And for you to do it with everything else that was going on at NICTD at the time, I think is an example for other some of our other members out there that it can be done. Not only can it be done, it can be done while you're trying to manage all those other issues that you have and other capital programs that you're trying to bring to the finish line. So as you mentioned, let's talk about a little bit about the project itself and scope and execution of that project. Angie, if you could go to the next slide for us. Chris, I think we're going to lean on you at Tracsis to kind of talk about what you delivered to NICTD and the actual scope of this program. Would you mind walking us through some of those details?
Yeah, sure. I think one thing I'd just pick up from what Mike said that's really been key to the success of this is that partnership approach. And Tracsis were like the third party that got involved in this halfway through. And we undertook our diligence on Railcom's ability to deliver in the same way NICTD had. And I think I'd like to think that we sort of arrived as the backup to help get things over the finish line as well. So I think it was a really positive environment to work in. Hopefully we'll hear a bit more about that from Justin and the guys in the NICTD team as well later on. But in terms of what we were actually delivering, so the PTC system really, when you break it down, there's three core parts to it. There's the back office pieces, the wayside and comms and the onboard, and we're just focused on the back office piece because that's the software bit that we're specialists in. And within that, there's the dispatch system that Mike mentioned that NICTD were keen to return to. Obviously, that system had evolved over the years that NICTD hadn't been using it, and like I think they're seeing the benefit of returning to a system that's continued to evolve. It's a real product-focused approach that we take with that. We gather from all the different users of the dispatch system and keep to iterate and improving it. And then the bit that made this project so exciting for us and such a game changer was that back office server piece and the ability to integrate into the wider PTC system. And we had the benefit of being able to look at that back office server piece and really design it from a reliability standpoint and a user experience standpoint. So we focused on reporting capabilities and yeah, the architecture around structuring this so that dispatch users would have a good experience of connectivity and synchronization between the CAD and the back office servers. And yeah, it was, we'll talk a bit about the actual process of implementing it, but from a technology point of view, it's making sure that we've got those interoperability pieces and modularizing this PTC, this monolithic PTC system, I think is a really key element in driving it forward and driving innovation, because it was a huge lift. It was obviously billions and billions of dollars and a huge amount of effort from the industry to get PTC implemented in time. But it can't just stop there. It's got to continue to evolve, and we've got to keep seeing benefit come from it for the railroads. And hopefully this plays a small part in doing that and in demonstrating how we can continue to drive it forward and evolve it.
Thanks, Chris. Angie, you want to jump to the next slide? I think we want to talk a little bit more about the actual implementation of this project. And Chris, I'll let you start with some of the background work for not only Tracsis, but as you mentioned, Railcom and predecessor programs before that, and getting us to where you were to be able to deliver something in the first place. And then if the NICTD team's there, I'd like to jump to you to get some of your thoughts on some of the other items here, the approval process, working with FRA, the installation, and how the process went overall. I see, Mike's been connecting to audio for the last 30 minutes, so I guess he's splicing cables manually over there. So maybe you can jump in for us and talk a little bit more about those details after Chris talks about some of the actual background work that went to developing the systems in the first place. Chris?
Yeah, I think Mike alluded to it. This was the first time that anyone had really replaced a component part like this for the PTC system, and therefore it's the first time Railcom and then Tracsis had done it. So the great thing for any future projects is we've been through this once, and we've lived through all the testing processes, and it's extensive. There's right the way from the software testing, regression testing, QA testing, all the way through the lab testing. And I think there were a lot of lessons learned as we went through that process, which was great to see. And support from the NICTD guys was outstanding throughout the whole process. I think the lab testing in particular, having the teams on site and working together, again, it goes back to that partnership approach and everyone being able to lean in and put the effort in when it's needed to get those testing pieces over the line. And then once we'd wrapped up a lot of the testing, it was onto the easy part, I guess, which is where we could probably hand over to the NICTD folks to talk a bit about the FRA approvals and from there onwards.
Yeah, NICTD folks, and feel free. I know there's a bunch of you in there, but I know, Pat, you worked with me certainly a lot on the FRA side of the years, and there's certainly a team there that I don't see any of them on the call, so it's probably safe. But they work very closely with railroads, but this is something new, right? And it's just on the heels of getting PTC implemented. So I'm sure for them, a railroad coming in and saying, "Hey, everything's working, but we want to change everything," is probably an interesting perspective. So could you share some of the process of getting FRA on board with making this transition, especially for an operating railroad?
Sure. Thanks, Devin. So as we all know, back when we were going through and implementing PTC many, many years ago, we all went through and did our field testing, and then we did, revenue service demonstration, did all our tests, got approval, moved into revenue service, and ran our trains. Well, we didn't have that all that luxury time right now. We're in revenue service. So any testing we have to do with Tracsis, we had to do in off hours when we were not running trains, because the FRA wouldn't allow us to shut down trains. We had to bus. There are times that we were busing passengers. So we didn't run, we still moved our passengers from point A to B via busing, but we couldn't cancel our trains. So we bused passengers, we worked in off hours, we did everything we could do to continue to move our passengers, but we still did our testing from 2 a.m. to 3 a.m., 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. on weekends. That was just to do the field testing. As far as the testing of the system, all the human factor tests and all that stuff had been worked out going through based off the WebTech examples and the WebTech side. That all had to be reconfirmed using the Tracsis documentation. So that was quite a bit of a deal too, going through line by line testing to show the FRA how Tracsis was dealing with all of those different items and how they handled all that. So NICTD went through, worked with our vendors, worked with Tracsis, showed the FRA, went back and forth several over-the-shoulder meetings, kind of walked our way through it, had no major problems. got FRA approval, and now we're full revenue service. It was a difficult path, but we got here, and quite frankly, we're glad everything's done it, and it's really been a benefit for NICTD.
Could you talk administratively for those in the audience? I know there's a few out there who are very familiar with the PTC process and approval process. What did you have to do from a paperwork administrative perspective? Did you have to do, I'm assuming, test approvals, IP update or SP updates? Could you talk a little bit about what programmatically you had to do on your side as the railroad?
We had to do we filled out a full RFA, request for amendment for our IP as well as our SP, just to show the different changes that we had. Because you have to remember, Devin, too, not only did we make changes to our back office, but we were in the middle of changing our double track at the same time. So we were juggling two major things going on at once. So we handled both of them, worked with the FRA to get both of them done. There wasn't really too much of a major change in our IP. Didn't have to modify their DP at all, but the IP is the one that got changed mainly because of the field items that got changed because of double track. But everything that got referenced with the new Tracsis system and how it handled the HFAs, that got all handled and updated in our form, our Appendix G or Appendix F, reference, cross-reference, double-checked, and approved accordingly.
Yeah, I like I said, having to go through multiple projects and have to do not only the double tracking effort, but also this at the same time was probably a fun exercise. And I know you had several late nights trying to get all of it done, but I think it's worked out for you. Let's talk about the installation process itself, because again, you're an operating railroad and you got to move passengers, as you alluded to. So what were some of the challenges that you faced there in making this transition for not only the new construction, but the actual operating railroad itself, and trying to keep passengers moving, but at the same time work out any issues that you came across as you implemented it?
Some of the things that we worked through with our Tracsis team members, they had originally designed the system to be for what they had designed for a CAD system. NICTD, following the norms of PTC, we wanted to make sure that we were 100% fault tolerance. We're able to roll over in case we had accidents, 99.999 uptime, all that good stuff we all know about. So we made tweaks to their design. They were 100% marching with us, worked with us to beef up the system where we felt it needed to be, followed all of our testing, worked right along with us, agreed to everything. All of our tests were successful. As we moved along, a couple things had to be adjusted, but once they were adjusted, didn't have any problems with it. Had several start and stops. We were very open about that with everyone we've talked to, and all the communications we had with other roads and with the FRA. We had plenty of times where we implemented and had to jump back to our previous CAD boss system because things didn't quite turn out the way we wanted, just because things weren't 100%, but we worked through that. And once we got a stable system that we all agreed upon, we've had no problems since we ran into full revenue service.
Yeah, I think that's probably where a lot of people have most of the fears. What happens if I have an issue and I have to fall back? I mean, it's a complicated process to go back and forth between two different CAD systems while you're trying to maintain
I don't
service.
know of any road, Devin, I don't know of any road that went into deploy TMDS first go around that successfully did it the first time.
Yeah.
I know when we did it, we went for months trying to get TMDS rolling. So going through all we did with Tracsis, that was nothing compared to our original deployment of TMDS.
So you
I
were,
think it made it I think it made it a little easier too, is we have 4 different desks that are dispatching capable. And we had one designated desk that had the original system TMDS on it, and we had one desk that had the Tracsis Railcom system on it. So if when we did have to roll back, we would just, they would just reconnect to the other desk, and the dispatchers would just move over and utilize that desk. So it made it a little bit easier, the transition of, just for the testing part and for the implementation part. So they were able to just transfer that way.
Yeah, thanks. I was going to ask. I mean, operationally, how did you set it up so that you made it that? Because whether you use the backup system or one of your core workstations to kind of transition over and have that fallback ability, that's crucial to being able to implement this in a way that doesn't disrupt operations too much. What about training for the dispatchers? How did that go? Having to learn another system as they're still working through their daily jobs, and any issues there? Was that well received?
We had the previous Railcom system. Some of the dispatchers had used it, and I think most of them actually hadn't. I was one of the dispatchers that did, but we had different training sessions that we would pull them off, and they would go through and sit through, and we had the actual system set up. Justin came in and Pat and set it up, conference style, and they just sat and was able to work through the system live, not connected to the railroad, but actually click through and see how the signals were going to line, and issue blocks, and just do different dispatching functions. So there were several training sessions with that. So.
And did you do that in sort of a mock environment or live, just viewing the trains, obviously not connected and having any impact on authorities, but how did you do that, with a mock environment or with an actual mirror of what you're running?
Yeah, we had it set up in our lab environment, Devin, for several weeks, and we're able to get dispatchers to come down to our lab area and just kind of work with the Tracsis team and go from one end of our road to the other, and just try different scenarios, different things to see, one, not only that they were comfortable with it, but two, just kind of work out the kinks, dot the I's, cross the T's, all that good stuff to make sure everything was correctly entered into the system, made sure that everybody was comfortable with it. It was a big benefit for not only our team, but also for Tracsis to get a better understanding of how NICTD operates. Everybody knows no two roads handle things the same, so it was advantageous for their team as well.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about how you program that or manage that on-site work? Was there a dedicated NCTD or NICTD personnel involved, or was it, just Chris had free reign of his team, could go and do whatever they needed to on the railroad? I imagine there was some level of oversight, but again, you still have your day jobs to maintain and keep the railroad running. So how did you work with the team to actually do the implementation from a on-site oversight perspective?
From the PTC team, we pretty much tried to have a dedicated person from the PTC team to work with Tracsis when they were here. One of my guys were there with them at all times to kind of help them work around, for us to learn the system, to get ourselves educated as well as them. Sarah made dispatchers available as often as she could to work with us as well. But the PTC team was hand in hand with Tracsis as much as we could.
Let's jump to the last item here, because I want to see what everybody's thoughts from both Tracsis and NICTD is here. Lessons learned. I mean, you've hit on a number of different things in terms of how you did this and how you made this transition. But going back now, hindsight being what it is there anything you would have done differently? Anything that worked well that was a surprise that you didn't think would work well, or you thought would be more of a challenge, or things that were vice versa, where it was more of a challenge than you thought, or items where you're glad that it worked out in lab testing before you tried to put it in the field? Any thoughts from either side in terms of lessons learned for how this could be deployed in property?
Devin, I'll jump in just at a very high level. I always thought that the major hurdle was going to be developing the CAD boss interface. And I think that we tackled that one with I won't say with ease, but I thought going into this, I thought that was going to be the big hurdle, and that flipping back to the Tracsis Railcom CAD system was going to be a walk in the park. And I guess you sort of forget the pains you went through initially when we switched to Railcom in the first place. As Pat pointed out, when we switched from Railcom to TMDS, there's differences in that system and things to work out. And I guess I did not have an appreciation for how long that was going to take. But I will also say that one of the things that I think we did very well was made sure that when we rolled into Tracsis, if we felt it wasn't going to work, we made sure that we had a very detailed, methodical, and timely ability to flip back to TMDS. And I think we got it down to what, team, 10 minutes or so from if we made the decision from the point where we identified what we needed, what we thought was an issue that needed to revert back to TMDS, we could flip back in about 10 minutes, Sarah, Pat, something like that. Justin?
Yeah, about 10 minutes.
Yeah, and that gives you peace of mind, knowing that you've got that safe harbor. And when did we finally flip over 100% to Tracsis? Was that early October?
22nd of September. Not that I've got it circled on the calendar or anything, but yeah, 22nd of September.
I wasn't with you, staring at you, not letting you out of my sight. I remember that, Chris.
Yeah.
You took my phone away, I think. But we made the decision. We maintained a connection and paid for a connection to Wabtec TMDS through the end of the year. And that's about the time the team came and said, you know what, we don't need to pay for that anymore. We need to cut the cord. We're ready to go it without having the backup. So making sure that, you know, there's going to be some growing pains when you switch to a new system. I thought it was going to be the PTC connection. Turned out to be that wasn't as the bigger challenge, or the one that took longer than I thought. Making sure you've got the insurance policy to be able to flip back so that you know that your operation is always going to be protected. Those are the kind of the lessons I learned out of this whole process.
Thanks, Mike. And you hit on it, and it's something I didn't appreciate till we had this discussion today, is that how important it is to be able to reliably fall back and then get back. Because I remember the first time around, as some of you have alluded to, when PTC was being implemented, even railroads with existing, CAD systems that worked, every railroad's different in the US, and there's slight variations to the theme. So it doesn't matter where you're going, what software you're putting in. There was always growing pains with each property we went to because of the dispatching, because the rules were slightly different. Whether they were operating under G-Core, NORAC, whatever it was, there were still unique aspects to that railroad that had to be worked through that you didn't realize till you're sitting there going, oh, why is it doing this? And then by the time you filtered through the reasoning, you could fix it and get it back up and running again. But it's something that I think most of us forget about, is that in the US, we have so many layered operating procedures and differences between our railroads that it can be a challenge when you're taking this on, and you kind of forget about those things and those little minute details, which could be nothing more than a pull down, but it could be important for that railroad and its operations, and trying to work through those is a challenge. Chris, anything from your perspective, from Tracsis' perspective, in terms of lessons learned and what worked well, what might have been better next time around?
Yeah, I think it's a variation on that theme, really, around where we saw the sort of tail end, the last 5% really take a fair amount of effort, was engaging really directly with the dispatchers and spending the time with them. And you asked Sarah about how that was managed, but it was great to have that time with them. And hindsight's a beautiful thing. We should have done that a bit sooner, but we were so focused on that boss FRA approval piece and making sure we got through that. That I think we probably missed a little bit of focus on that earlier on, but the time we spent on site with the team was just absolutely critical. And from a company standpoint here, we want to make sure that we're really user focused, and that's something we'd encourage any future railroad to really invest the time into, is making sure those dispatch users are getting a full walkthrough of the system and are getting to point to those simple pieces that can make a big difference. The system's so configurable that a lot of the time they were relatively easy fixes to be able to get things sorted that dispatchers wanted and were used to, and it's giving them that comfort. So yeah, I think really it's the user engagement, and now we've proven the boss out. That's where we'd focus a lot more time earlier in the processes on that dispatch side.
No, you're right, Chris. I think that's all too often we forget about the end user, right? It's those other things we're worried about integrating and the approvals, but it's got to be a system worth investing in, right? It's got to be a system that people want to use, and I think that will segue well into our last slide here. But before we hit to that, any additional thoughts from the NICTD team there in the room for lessons learned?
Yeah, I agree with what Mike and Chris both said. But I also appreciate that it's recognized and something that you guys are taking on and wanted to adjust going forward. So yeah, we appreciate you guys coming in and helping us out with that.
Angie, if you'd like to please go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about where we are with benefits. I don't know if everybody saw, but Kellyanne did mention in the chat that if you have questions, you want to throw them in the chat. We will leave a little bit of time at the end to go through those and put everybody on the spot with questions here, wrap things up. But let's talk a little bit about benefits. Again, this is not an insignificant undertaking to replace your dispatching system while you're running a railroad. And so there's got to be value there, right? More than just the dollar amount, although that can be certainly a big driver. It's got to be a usable system. It's got to be, it's the heart of your railroad and the operations, right? Every day. So it's got to be worth the transition. Let me start off, I guess, with the team there in the room. What are some of the big benefits that you've seen so far from making that leap of faith, as Mike put it?
So one of the items that improved operations the most was the customization of like each dispatcher being able to set it up how they want, and it's not set to one specific screen like we've seen in the past dispatching system. So whatever works best for certain dispatchers, they're able to use that. And then some of the other items is how quick Tracsis, how responsive they are when we have issues. We're not waiting months between updates. So when we do have high priority items, they're working on it relatively quick.
And the responses that we get when we do ask for items or, point out items that would be beneficial, not just being told of a workaround to get around some other, things that we don't necessarily care for. I'll say the workaround word. It's, wanting to actually fix it and make the product be what we want it to be. So not just telling us other ways to do it. So that's a huge factor, I think, from a dispatcher standpoint.
Another item from a technical standpoint that the PTC team appreciates is when we are working on the system in our support window and we complete for the time and bring the system back up, it comes back up within a couple minutes. Whereas with the previous system we had 10-15 minutes before everything came back up online before we could test it. With the current Tracsis system, a minute or two and we're back online, and we can have a dispatcher, have the terminal carman go out, initialize the car, make sure we're communicating, make sure we're ready for operations to begin their day. That's a big advantage for us, because one, it gives us additional time to do our work, and two, if there's a problem, we know about it right away. We don't have to take that additional window and cut it down. That there's might be something else wrong. So it's overall, the system is much more performance enhancing. It just works better for us. We don't have the issues that we had before with the servers. We don't have the problems with drives filling up the way that we had with the other systems. Monitoring and support is so much easier with this. Just really is a lot cleaner and a lot easier to maintain than what we had before.
And touching on the reliability as well, we don't have the computer crashes or the program crashes that we had before, or computer restarts, or that, and especially when you had to restart the computer and then it would take the program so long to come up, it was very painful. So we have not had one of those instances with this system. So
Yeah, and I think you hit on a unique point there. And maybe Chris or Marcelo can tell us more. I mean, I think we're all used to the workstation-based system, right? Where if that happens, you shut it off, bring it back online, blow in the cartridge, do whatever you need to get it back working again. But in this case, that's not how this system operates, right? It's hosted instead of on an individual workstation. Could you talk a little bit about that, Chris, and the benefits there?
Yeah. So as we were designing it with that goal to increase the reliability, it's a server-centric system. So the NICTD system's on-prem. We do hosted SaaS systems elsewhere, but it's still on the central server, and everything's synced back to that. So it's not reliant on individual workstations, which means that you've got that greater level of synchronization and that ability to spin it up and down more quickly. As well, we built it around some really solid hot standby server setups, so that things would fail over nice and quickly, and that's part of what allowed us to roll backwards and forwards quite quickly as well, I think. So yeah, it was great to be able to apply a lot of the logic and expertise that we've got in this area to build a system up like that from the ground up. And it's good to hear the NICTD team benefiting from that. And we'll keep counting number of days since there was any kind of issue or failure. So September the 22nd through till now seems like a good stretch. We'll keep that going.
Yeah, and I think Sarah may have hit it as well. It's the attention for commuter railroads it's hard to get the attention sometimes that you need to work out issues. And rather than everything being a sticky note in the operations manual as a workaround until maybe one day you'll get update 0.4 or whatever that you're looking for that will address your issues, to have a much more hands-on to fix the problem itself, so that software can then be more functional moving forward, and you're not constantly working around workarounds. I think that's a big part of this as well, in terms of some of the things that we struggle with as commuter railroads is, again, getting time and attention, have that level of detail, have that level of engagement. We don't have the budgets or the size of the Class 1, and so a small railroad, NICTD being one of them, right? Even compared to some of the commuter railroads, to get that level of attention, I think is important. I think it's well received. Any other thoughts? Let's go to the last slide. I know we've got about 10 minutes, so I want to leave some time in case there's some Q&A from the audience out there. But let's talk quickly going forward. And I know, Marcelo, you're out there. I'm going to make you talk because you haven't talked yet. And you spent more time on here than I did. So we got to get you on the camera so you can talk. Where do you see this market being and going? I mean, obviously it's Tracsis Railcom is entering a market that's fairly well dominated by some well-established players. What do you think that, given experience of NICTD here and some of the things you're able to do, what do you bring to the table? What do you think people should consider, whether it's your product or somebody else's, when they're looking at the functionality of their dispatch systems?
Yeah, it's it's really been eye-opening for me. I've only been with Tracsis for about a year now, so I'm kind of learning this space, but I'm very excited about our future prospects. I've been demoing software solutions to railroads around the world for half of my career, and I've never seen so much enthusiasm for our CAD and BOSS solutions. It's actually quite shocking in some cases. I think we touched on some of the reasons why. I think the ease of use of the software, the out-of-the-box functionality, really robust, does everything we need to do plus. And I think most importantly, probably just exceptionally high configurability, which I think is lacking with the solutions in the marketplace today. So really excited about that. Another thing I think that's important in the industry right now is, and how we counter this, is Tracsis really committed to being the most responsive partner in the industry. So when it comes to customer service, that's the primary thing. We want to be agile, flexible. We want to be quick to respond. We want to resolve solutions as quickly as we can and respond to our customers and the industry best possible. Another thing, more broadly regarding the market, we are pleased to be serving the industry by fostering, a more competitive environment. Mike has touched on it earlier. Chris touched on it. We believe that the benefits from our, offering a preferred alternative in this space will result in lower prices in the industry. I'm not just talking about upfront pricing, but also the ongoing maintenance and support, as well as changes that are required. So we really hope to and expect that these numbers are going to come down significantly. We also expect more innovation and development from this competitive environment. This is going to help drive the enhancement of tools across the industry, and system reliability. We touched on that as well. I think I heard someone mention earlier that since September 22nd at NICTD, since cutover, we haven't had a single CAD BOSS outage. So the reliability is there. It's really strong. And, this is critical, not just for ensuring efficiency in the railroad networks across the country, but also safety, system uptime, reduced lag. These are all critical things that we're working really hard on, and we feel the industry will be better from. Another thing, I just mentioned it as well, high configurability and integration with third-party tools. Chris touched on this a little bit when he talked about what we've provided to NICTD specifically. And, customer service. I mentioned it. The customers are just going to demand a higher level of customer service and faster issue resolutions. These are key things that we feel by having a more competitive environment will come out of it. And in the end of the day, all these benefits will result in a safer and more efficient operation of the railroads. I'm saying all these things. We're proud of serving the industry by fostering this competitive environment. We are also excited about growing and expanding our own footprint, right? So we look very much forward to continuing conversations with railroads in the industry for getting a bigger piece of the pie, of course, so selfishly. But we are proud of offering this alternative to the industry. I think it's really important.
Thanks, Marcelo. And I do see we have a few questions here, so I'll jump into those. But first, Mike, if you're still out there, any final thoughts from your side as well on this?
Yeah, and obviously it's a great opportunity for Chris and Marcelo to give their commercial. But that's really not why we're here today. Actually, if it wasn't successful, we wouldn't be hosting the webinar, right? It would be a war story we'd be telling. But it has been successful. But that's really not the point. The point is that with a successful competitor, those that maybe don't choose to go to Tracsis Railcom, or maybe somebody else who enters the field, it's going to force TMDS to take notice. And so those that are left behind, I think it's going to help those who stay with Wabtec or some other system. It's going to help step up their game. and make them take notice that there is another player in town that offers some more bells and whistles, and maybe at a more competitive price, or maybe better reliability, or maybe better customer service. All those things benefit all of us in the commuter rail industry, and actually the railroad industry as a whole. And so, that's really at the heart of it. It's the story that we're not forced into this one-stop shopping anymore, where we don't have a choice, and it's basically take it or leave it. And, we'll get around to you when we feel like it. And, oh, by the way, if it doesn't work for you this way, here's 17 steps you can take to maybe get to where you might want to be, sort of. We now have a little more, I think, leverage in this arena, in this technology, and I'm hoping that we find other ways to find more opportunities for other aspects of PTC to be broken apart and sort of a modular based system as well. What that's going to be, maybe that's PTC 2.0. I have no idea, but we didn't get competition the first time around. We need to do whatever we can to foster that as we move into the future with this system.
Thanks, Mike. I think that's insightful for us. I know we're short on time. I know we have a lot of questions, not a lot of questions. We have a few questions in the Q&A. So I don't know if any folks on the panel here, while I'm going through some of the questions live, you can answer any of them as well, typed. That might work as well. But I know people have to go to other meetings, but we'll try to hang out and get through some of these. I think the first one, it looks like it was answered, and that's the uptime at NICTD since full implementation. So far, I've heard that there have been no issues since you made the full conversion, right?
Somebody knock on wood.
All right, I've got wood here. At least it's particle board. It's close enough. Is the Tracsis BOSS also an MDM solution, or is there a separate MDM solution?
Yeah, that question comes up a couple of times in this list. Yeah, the MDM solution is is built into the BOSS, so it's part of that solution. Great.
Are there any statistics from mean time to repair for issues that NICTD has run into, or is it still too fresh to have something?
From a Tracsis point of view, we haven't started measuring that because we're still finishing off those final bits that were raised that weren't operationally critical, but were the sort of nice to haves and the deliverables at the end of it. That's something we'll monitor with NICTD, and I'm sure they'll be looking for us to continue the responsiveness they've seen as we move forward through the months and years ahead. I don't know, Sarah, Pat, Justin, have you had anything to that?
Add to that.
I'll take that as a no. Went off mute for a minute and then went back on. How many miles did this involve from revenue miles and track miles?
So PTC miles, 75 total. 40 of that was double main, and then the other 30 was single track with 2 undecideds.
Okay.
And then there will be an 8-mile line segment addition coming up this year as well, which is really where we started with the Westlake project. When that goes online, that will add an additional 8 miles of PTC service with Tracsis as the CAD system.
Great. And they threw out the vital term. Warning, vital's been thrown out there. Is the BOSS vital? And if not, is there anything that needs to be done to bring it up to that status?
Good question. Let's define what a vital BOSS needs to look like. And go from there. There'd be some work to do that, but it's on our radar and our pipeline to make sure we satisfy that when it becomes a requirement.
No, that's a good way to answer that. Pat knows my feelings about the term vital and its usage in this industry. It gets thrown around a lot, from our days of ATC and ATP operations versus what does it mean for PTC today. The next one, did NICTD fully replace TMDS's suite of applications? And if not, what were the elements that replaced, what elements remained? It sounds like it was a full change.
Everything except the WSRS. WSRS wayside status relay. That's going to be a Princeton product.
Okay.
We're in the process of cutting over to Princeton's WSRS, as Justin indicated, in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be off of the WebTech product by the end of next month.
And I'm just going to keep breezing through here. Again, if you can stay on, great. If you have to jump, that's okay too. A suite of questions here from the West Coast. Is Tracsis current MDM and BOSS ICD 3.1 and 3.0 backwards compatible?
Yes.
Okay. Are you participating in the AAR PSEAG committee for vendors of the next generation of PTC functionality?
I'd have to defer to a couple of the other guys in Tracsis who aren't on the call. We're on several committees. I can't remember whether we're on that specific one. But I think from our point of view, Devin, this is part of the challenge of as PTC becomes more modularized and you expand out the supply chain options, it's going to become more important for all supply chain partners to be able to be involved in conversations at all levels up through AAR and the FRA to help define and keep up to date with future changes to the requirements.
Great. And I'm going to skip some of these just because I want to get everybody's voice out there. And so if we don't have time to go through them, I apologize. But let's talk about interoperability. And is the system interoperable with other operations, other tenant operations on your railroad? Is there any issues there in terms of hosting other operations, be it freight or passenger for
There's
that
no
matter?
issue because we host freight. There's no issues with them.
Yeah, NICTD has a tenant of ours, Chicago South Shore CSS Freight. We host them. They run a freight operation that operates on our railroad as well as goes on to NS, CSX, CN. So yeah, there's no problem with that at all.
So for those, because a lot of the folks here probably have host operations for other class ones and others, and any foreseeable issues there in terms of other ITMS operations transitioning over to a different system, or you think that's well worked out with some of the issues you've gone through?
We have had no problems so far.
Okay. Does Tracsis CAD support EDI?
Good question.
You'll have to take it all, Chris.
By the way, Devin, we are happy to take these questions after the call, and as long as they're, the question, the person who asked the question is noted, then we can always get back on some of these as well.
Yeah, I've got the full list. There's only a few that are anonymous here.
Okay.
And so
we're happy to do that if they're directed to us.
Yeah.
So EDI is what? Can someone help me with as I'm going to play the British card here and say I haven't learned quite every acronym over the last 3 years. So EDI is.
I was hoping you'd know. So.
Okay, my tech guy has said we don't currently have any active customers using EDI interfaces, but whatever an EDI is, I'm confident we can build an interface. So apologies for a little bit of ignorance there.
Okay, and then that's fine. That's what I do for most of my discussions, right, Mike? I'll end it with one or two more here because we have gone over, and I do want to respect everybody's time. But I do think we did get a lot of questions, so it's important to kind of go through these so we get a sense of how things are moving. But what mechanisms do you use to ensure data integrity and audit logging for compliance with regulatory mandates. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I would need someone more technical than me to answer that. Let's see if Andy, our CTO, is on. Do you want to take that, Andy, or do you want to say, well, we can follow that up? The question was, what mechanisms do you use to ensure data integrity, audit logging, and compliance with regulatory mandates?
Andy's line is opened, so all he has to do is unmute and then he can answer.
Well, we might not have connectivity.
I'm not sure
We
Andy's.
might have to come back to. I can see who's asked that, so we'll come. We might have to come back to that one, Devin.
Yeah. Let's see. And this is clarified. It's electronic data interchange was ETI or EDI, if I can talk.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's the bit between.
Communicating between roads.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we don't. NICTD don't utilize that, I don't believe. So we don't have an active customer with that. There's a question. We don't have a CAS solution. I can see a question asking whether Tracsis have one of those. We integrate with other CAS solutions, and we interface with the federated network through ITCM gateway provided by others. Yeah, I'll pick an easy question to finish, if that's all right, Devin.
Yeah, sure.
Good one. How do we manage new feature requests and development? So this is a great example where being a software-centric company really comes to the fore. So we have a product owner, which is a pretty standard role in a software company, and they essentially control all the requests that come in from our customers. And we focus on those requests that either deliver a clear operational benefit or are consistent across multiple customers. And one thing I've found over my years here is that for all that the railroads are very geographically spread in the US, and there are differences in operations, there is more in common than there is different. So often when one railroad wants something, especially if you share that with other railroads, you'll find a commonality of desire for certain features. So we have a product roadmap that we develop every year and has a multi-year outlook, and that's based on input from all of the railroads we work with.
I thought you were going to take the moving block question, but yeah, you went too easy. So, well, I've copied all the questions in the Q&A that we didn't get a chance to get to. So for those of you that are not anonymous, I will be able to work with Kellyanne and the team here to make sure we get some answers back if we didn't get to them during this call. But first off, thank you again for everybody that participated in this. I do think it's a great opportunity to learn something that most of us haven't thought about in a while, and that's our dispatching system and how functional it is for our operations. And again, thank you, Mike, for you and your team for spending some time walking us through what you did and some of the examples of what worked and how you did it. And for the Tracsis team and coming on and being willing to subject yourselves to all sorts of points of ridicule now, just to give us some background on your products and what you did for the project here and what you offered. So any parting words, Kellyanne, before we get out of here?
Nope, just thank you, Devin, for managing this conversation in a way that I think delivered a lot of content in just over an hour. So thank you. And to everyone else who was part of the meeting today, I appreciate your contributing your information to the better of the industry. So have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.